rich, tastes incredible. Georgia's all around.
ジョージアに任せろ。
Please welcome Kristine McKenna and Sabrina Sutherland.
You seem far away.
I know.
Okay, they didn't really tell you who Sabrina is. She was the producer of Twin Peaks, and she basically figured out everything.
Hello.
You were one of the first people who read the script, and your job was to read through it and figure out how to make everything in it happen. What seemed most daunting to you when you first read the script?
I think just reading the entire script, the entire thing is daunting. It's so big. So just trying to get my head around all of the different locations and all the cast and everything that needed to be done in this show in the amount of time we had, that was something that was kind of mind-blowing.
So in terms of time we had, were you, the first time you read it, did you think this has to happen in 9 hours, or did you think this is going to be bigger?
Well, okay, that's a great question. So when I originally read anything, I was only given 2 scripts. This is way early on before anything happened. I was given 2 scripts, and David explained to me what the story was going to be. It's not the same 2 first parts of the show now, but it was, 2 scripts that they had. And what my job was to do was to get a budget together and a schedule to present to Showtime to see if we could make a deal, basically, how much it would cost for them. So reading that, that was so big in David's mind that for him it was more than like 9 hours, but that's what I was told. It was going to be 9 hours, but he kept telling me, no, it's more than 9. And I kept hearing, the more he kept talking, I was saying, yeah, I agree with you, this is not 9 hours. So in my head, in David's head, it was never 9 hours. But when it eventually, when we did the deal with Showtime, they agreed that it was going to be more than 9. We just didn't know how many. And we didn't know all the way until the very end when it was edited and David was done with everything and put them into pieces. That was the only time we knew how many there were going to be. So for 2 years, when we started pre-production till the very end, we really didn't know how many hours there were going to be. We just knew there were more than 9.
Yeah, for people who followed all the travails of Twin Peaks: The Return, part of the reason David left was Showtime couldn't seem to understand that this wasn't episodic television, that David was thinking about a movie, and he couldn't really put an end time on the movie, and eventually it turned out to be 18 hours. What proved to be the most daunting part of the shoot?
Well, I think, in a way, post-production. Production, so we had a limited amount of time to shoot, and we had to shoot every day. We couldn't not finish something, so we had to finish every day. So just that, getting into that routine, and we shot 142 days total, and it was just one day after another. We didn't stop. And when David and I, we'd work over the weekends as well. And a lot of times, shooting-wise, the whole crew, we'd be working 6-day weeks. So we'd work Monday through Saturday. Sunday, we'd reconvene, Scott Cameron, David, and myself, and we'd kind of think of what the next week was going to be. So we were always working, so just time was daunting in that respect. But once it was done and we went into post-production, we only had basically a year. And if you think of 18 hours to edit, mix, do visual effects, color time, in that period of time, that was the hardest challenge. That was the most daunting, to try and fit 18 hours worth of stuff in that and to deliver it as well.
Yeah. So I wonder, okay, you read the script, you come to episode 8, which is really the most complex episode, and on the page I see, okay, atomic explosion. What does that mean to you? How do you allocate time? How do you envision that when you read that on the page?
Well, so everything was done as a movie, so everything was shot by location, and there are several parts of that are shot in production. So the only thing that kind of isn't necessarily shot would be the visual effect kind of pieces, which come later. And David would always talk from the very beginning with Booth, our visual effects company, and with me and whoever else needed to know just how long that he was envisioning that to be. So he always kind of talked about, well, I think that's going to, first I think he said 16 minutes, and then he said 8 minutes. And then it always kind of held at 8 minutes, but we didn't know what those 8 minutes were going to be. And it's not like it was written down. It's all in David's head. So
was that created in post-production?
Yeah, well, depending on what the certain images are. Some were post-production, some were in production.
Yeah. So Booth is a French special effects company, Pierre Booth?
Visual effects, yes.
Yeah, digital effects. Then they made important contributions. They helped with the frog moth, the sky vortexes. How did you find them?
Pierre met David. David goes to France frequently and met Pierre there, and I went over and met with Pierre and David, and we talked about it at the very, very beginning. In fact, I think that was the first meeting we had was with visual effects, because David had in his head all of these things he wanted to do, and there's no practical way of doing them for the most part. Yeah. So we talked way back when, so that was in 2014 in October, so that was a long time ago.
How fluid was, I've interviewed a lot of actors who worked on this, and many of them commented on the fact that David would just add scenes along the way. He'd just decide there was something he wanted to happen. Was that kind of routine?
That's part of David's process, for sure. You always are prepared to do, he wants to experiment. And he wants to do different things. Yeah. So he wants every day to have time to be able to come up with something. If an idea comes, he wants to be able to shoot it. Yeah. And sometimes things would happen, either with actors or, like for example, with Tim Roth. Tim really enjoyed, and Jennifer, they enjoyed being in the show, and they were done. And Tim kept texting saying he wanted more. And so I talked to David, and so David said, okay, so he wrote another scene for them so that they could come back and do another day.
Were there 2 actors that were cast that had a chemistry you hadn't anticipated together?
It's interesting. I wish, unfortunately, Joanna, I don't know if it was announced, Joanna wasn't able to make it today. I wish Joanna could.
She thought it was tomorrow.
David has such a great, I don't understand in his head. I wish I understood it. But he has such a great way of knowing things will work. And a lot of times he picks people and I think, wow, that's very interesting. And then you see them and it's like, I can't imagine anybody else doing that. Yeah. So, but that's throughout the whole show. Yeah. Everybody was like that. It's just,
I interviewed Joanna Ray, and she's told me that when she's casting actors for David, she's been casting his thing since Blue Velvet, that sometimes she'll say to David, I don't think that person can act. And he'll say, oh, that's not a problem. It's like if he sees something in the person, he wants them there. Yeah.
Exactly.
What was the most memorable day of the shoot for you?
Probably the day when I got to be in the show.
She was in the show. She's episode 2, Casino.
Episode 2 and 3 and 4.
Yeah, she's in the casino. Tell me how that came to pass.
Well, David has cast a lot of the crew people in the show for different things, and Scott Cameron and I would always. Scott Cameron was really good at fitting people in, and I would also throw people's names in and say, hey, why don't they do that? And David was always really good in saying, okay, yeah, they can go in. So I was pushing for Scott to do something, and I got Scott to be the man who throws the bottle, in Audrey's dance. And so he turned around and said, okay, then you should be the casino girl, the floor attendant. And David said, okay, you're going to do that. And it just so happened that was the last day of the shoot, or the last 2 days.
So was the day he told you you're doing it the day you did it?
No, I learned the week before.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Were you nervous?
No, I wasn't so nervous. It was fun, but David, I think, was kind of getting back at me in a way. And he...
For what?
For saying no and you can't do this. And he would change my lines up until when we were shooting. And even when he'd say, okay, we're going to go now, and then he'd say, wait a minute, and he'd change it. But it wasn't just changing a line. And I'm not an actor, so, I'm not good at remembering things. He would change the number amount of what the prize was. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I'd be trying to remember that, and then he'd say, oh, wait a minute, do this instead. And he added a couple lines and changed the numbers again, and so I think he was just needling me a little.
Yeah. Was it fun, though?
Yeah, it was really fun. Yeah. And the best part, the most amazing part, I think Kyle MacLachlan did an amazing job in this show.
Yeah.
Super, super job. And Kyle's such a nice person, and you talk to him, and he's just a certain way. And in the scene, I tap him on the shoulder, and he turns and he talks to me and he says, call for help. And so the very first take we did it, and I kind of stopped when I was doing it, but then continued and just walked off and following Kyle, and we went around a corner, and Kyle turned to me and he said, that's the first time you met Dougie, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, because I did not know who it was. When he turned around and I looked at him, I thought I'd see Kyle in his eyes, but it wasn't Kyle. It was this Dougie.
Yeah.
And it threw me.
Yeah. This was the question I was going to ask Joanna, but I can ask you. Joanna cast Blue Velvet, so she's known Kyle for a long time. You were on the original Twin Peaks, so you've known him for a long time, too. Were you surprised at how dark he could go in this? I was.
To be honest, I know Kyle is a really great actor that really doesn't get the opportunities that he should. I think he was really scary. And sometimes when somebody's really nice, or like a comedian sometimes, and they turn dark, they get really dark. So knowing he's such a nice person, and him trying to be dark, to me that makes it even scarier. So it doesn't surprise me. I expected him to be really good, but maybe not that good.
Yeah, he was
good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more question. Something that surprised me about how Twin Peaks: The Return's been received is people have reassessed Firewalk with Me and are kind of using that as like a decoding ring to understand Twin Peaks: The Return. Did you anticipate that? Did you think people would read it that way?
I do. I mean, I think David gave that kind of like, you should watch Fire Walk with Me in a way. It is, necessary for the whole story to think about what the story is. And maybe some of you haven't seen all of Twin Peaks yet, so I don't really want to give too much away. But it definitely leads into this new show. So I think it is important to see.
Yeah, and the movie's been reassessed. I mean, Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me was vilified when it came out, and now it's being proclaimed as his unsung masterpiece, which is really great. So
and I just want to say that's why at Cannes was so great, because David was booed for Fire Walk with Me, and then when we went there with the new show, he was applauded, so it was really moving.
She was sitting next to him. He was applauded for minutes and minutes. How long was it?
I think it was like 10 minutes or something. It was a long time.
That's great.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to tell us about David before they scoot you off and bring these next people in here?
No, David's an amazing genius in my point of view. That's about all I can say.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
But thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Did I take this one?
Yeah. Oh, should I do the introductions? Okay. The next two people coming out are Peter Deming and Gary D'Amico. Peter Deming is a cinematographer who was born in Beirut, And he first worked with David in 1992. He shot David's ill-fated television series On the Air. And then he went on to shoot Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Duran Duran on Staged. He assisted in various ways on Inland Empire, and he's shot all of Twin Peaks: The Return. And his next film is X-Men: The New Mutants, which will be out next year. Gary D'Amico is a special effects wizard who was brought into David's world, again, for On the Air in 1992. He was hired to invent a machine that spits plumbing parts, which he managed to do. And he's gone on to he's been on most of David's films, blowing things up and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start with Peter. Tell me about meeting David. Where and when was your first meeting with him?
I first met David. I was brought in to shoot 6 episodes of On the Air, which he did after Twin Peaks. He had done the pilot, and he was posting Fire Walk with me, and when they got the order to do 6 episodes. So I came in to interview with him, even though he wasn't directing any of them. And we had a 5-minute meeting, and that was it.
What was your first impression of him?
Well, I saw Eraserhead when it was in the movie theaters when I was in college, and I'd seen everything David did. So it's one of those things where you see someone's work over the years. When you meet them, you feel like you know them already, even though you've never met them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on The Return, my first question is, every time I watch the titles, I think, how did Peter Deming shoot this? Like the waterfalls and all that? Where did that come from?
Well, we shot a bunch of drone stuff when we were in Washington State.
What does that mean, drone stuff?
Well, drone is a little helicopter,
and
basically.
You just put the camera in there?
Yeah, it's built into it. And we had some specific shots we wanted to do in the forest, and we know we wanted to get around the falls and just shoot what David would call firewood. Just shots you're not sure where they're going to go.
Yeah.
And
is that how you got all the? There's often these pans of mountainsides with trees with heavy fog in them. Is that?
Yeah, that was actually Scott Ressler was. He shot sort of a splinter unit, second unit thing, and we would just send him out and say find some stuff, you know.
Yeah. So you've been on the set with him for a long time. Has his on-set style changed any over the years?
No.
Has he always? Now he directs through a bullhorn. Has he always directed through a bullhorn?
Off and on, yeah. And it's a lot of times it's kind of humorous because you're in a room that's about 8 by 8, and he still has the bullhorn.
Yeah.
And you're shooting a love scene, and he's got the bullhorn.
Yeah. Visually, a lot of the show, particularly like the first 20 minutes of episode 3 and all of episode 8, has a really otherworldly quality. How much of that just has to do with lighting?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at it again. To me, it's 1/3 lighting, 1/3 design, and 1/3 sound. Because I'm always struck by things that I shoot for David that I'm sort of, maybe it's not exactly what I wanted, maybe it's halfway, and then when I see it with the track that he creates, I'm like, oh, it looks better. Of course it doesn't. It looks exactly the same.
What were the hardest scenes to light?
Hardest scenes. I think the scene out in the middle of nowhere with Richard and Evil Coop. He takes him up on the hill.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime you're out, the script says, middle of the desert night, you're like, oh, here we go, But he actually, David designed, I think, the row of lights on top of that car. Did you build those?
Yeah, we made that.
That had a little thing they could pan around, because he knew I would probably balk a little bit.
Yeah. So Richard Horn is incinerated on that mountain. Did you have a role in the incineration of the Richard Horn?
When we killed Richard on the hill there? No,
he
not
kind
really.
of is like just this, in a...
It was a combination of lightning effects and post-production.
Yeah. What was the hardest thing to shoot in the series?
I think the stuff that you have no sense of what it's supposed to be, like I think where Carl lived. I mean, it wasn't hard on the day, but leading up to it, because I had no idea what it looked like. I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. In the script, the scene was interior, the fireman's house by the sea, which, of course, it wasn't a house, and it wasn't by the sea. So, but that was typical. And then once we got there and saw the location, and then, quick chat with David, we just sort of went to work.
And that's the scene with Senorita Dido.
Right.
That's so beautiful.
Right.
That looked really hard to light, actually.
Well, it was tricky, and you had to light parts of it, but not too much of it. You wanted it to be dark and weird, and he gives me sources like there's a projector running, but there's nothing playing, and it's sort of like it's great stuff. I mean, he just sort of gives you, some tools to work with, and then you got to sort of make it work.
Was it hard to shoot? Okay, Philip Jeffries turns into a tea kettle, and when we see him, he's just smoke on a ring of like a rainbow ring.
See, you know that now, but we didn't know that when we were shooting it.
Oh, really?
We just thought it was a tea kettle. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So how did you shoot that?
Well, I mean, it's just mood, really. It's just about mood, and they come in and they see this. They're just looking at it, and you just want to make it, I guess, dark and sort of, not show too much detail, keep some mystery in it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of mystery there. Another thing is, then the scene in episode 3 where Kyle gets sucked into a light socket. How do you shoot something like that?
Well, Kyle really sold that, because David would say, okay, now lean forward and sort of stretch out towards the socket, And we'd be snickering, saying, how's he going to do that?
Yeah. But he did it.
He sort of does it. Yeah, knowing that, Post will really follow his lead.
Yeah, I should say, Richard Beamer made a behind-the-scenes film that'll be in the DVD extras of the Red Room scenes, and there's some footage of that. And it's incredible what Kyle's able to do with his body in all different kinds of scenes. Yeah. Gary, what's the craziest thing you ever did with David?
Well, I'd have to echo what Peter said. Is just what he shoots from the hip. A lot of the like the episode 8, I think, would have had a lot of elements in it, and a lot of those we filmed prior to going into production. With a lot of it was in a water tank.
Yeah.
And Gary, can you make smoke coming in underwater and spark and things like that? So you're really pulling all your resources together to try and get elements.
But I think the famous one was the cabin on Lost Highway.
Oh yeah, the cabin.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, we had that cabin sitting on sticks out in the middle of nothing, on Dumont Dunes, and the wind was just crazy. I mean, the wind was sideways, and at night it would pick up. And one morning he walks up with the producer and says, "Gary, can we blow this sucker up?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, good morning, David." And sure, yeah, everybody always tells me things like that. And until his producer said, "What's this going to cost me?" So now I knew they were serious. So
no permits, by the way.
No permits. No, we got blessed by the local authority. But I didn't have anything to do that with, really. I mean, I had some igniters and some things. So my assistant and I drove into Vegas because that's the closest town. Now, right then, you could drive across the border, go into a gun shop, and bought up all the black powder they had, and got back. But the wind was so crazy blowing. It just says, how are we going to get this thing to fall apart? Because there were slats on the cab was made out of slats, and the wind was blowing through. So, I mean, my idea of an explosion is like a firecracker in a grape, just completely disintegrating it. But the only thing we could do is we just lined the inside of the cabin with plastic sheeting, got baggies of trash bags and filled them with gas and put some black powder charges underneath, got what propane tanks I had and opened them up inside and just said, okay, keep your camera, keep your finger on the trigger, be ready. Okay. Do. Okay, roll. And then we hit it. And it really wasn't what I was expecting. But it kind of went up like the Hindenburg, more kind of an explosion, more so than just completely, I'm going, shucks, I'm sorry, man. And he goes, that was beautiful. I love that. It was that's exactly what he wanted. So I mean, it was, go figure.
So why do guys like to blow things up?
You have to ask every
Come
other
on,
guy
Gary.
in the room.
Yes,
It's just something we do,
Gary,
yeah.
Gary really likes to blow things up.
Yeah, David does too, I think. You also were responsible for the car crash that launches Mulholland Drive. Tell us about that.
That was interesting too. That was a pretty good gag. I've never done that since like that, and I've never done it prior to that. But he wanted this Ford Taurus to smack into the back of this limousine at just breakneck rocket speed. So we had a construction crane with a 6,000-pound weight and a cable from that to the back of the Taurus. Mm-hmm. And when we dropped that weight, that car took off. I mean, it went right into that thing, and it drove it up the hill like he wanted it to do.
And what else happened when you dropped that weight?
What happened?
It went right through the road, remember?
Oh, yeah, that 6,000.
It
was like a die cut. I mean, just...
Right
we had bales of hay.
Right through.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was in Griffith Park. That was cool.
Yeah. So Laura Herring wasn't in the car when that...
No, there was nobody in the car.
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah, okay.
For sure.
So that sounds really dangerous.
It was, but you take the precautions. And, you clear everybody out. You know what the end result's going to be.
Yeah.
We make light of it now, but it's you put your game face on when you're doing it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. What's your favorite shot in the return?
Ooh, I don't know. There's so much volume of footage. I'd have to think about it. I don't know. I love the radio station just in general. Because it was really tough sort of segueing from the actual desert shoot to the radio station, which was on a stage.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. The first shot was the trickiest, where we sort of got dust going, and one of the woodsmen came in, and we tracked over to the front door. That's one that comes to mind. I really like the scene where they find Ruth's body, because you go from this really bright hallway that's sort of green-yellow, into sort of a normal room, into a very cool bedroom.
Yeah. What was the hardest thing to shoot?
Come back to me on that.
Well, you know what did look hard is in episodes 17 and 18, there's a lot of slow pans of really dark woods. Was that hard to shoot?
I'm trying to remember.
Well, it's how can you? It's it doesn't.
You know what actually was
lit.
fairly hard to shoot was that in 18 the car scene with Coop and Laura.
That long driving scene.
Because we weren't towing, we were just free driving. And so we had a couple little lights hidden in the car. And, it was me and the camera assistant in the back seat. And David on the radio in the follow car. And we're just driving around. I don't know where we're going. I didn't know what the backgrounds were going to be. And just trying to make it look not phony.
How long did that take?
Not very long. Nothing took very long.
Really?
We just moved along.
I heard you had to snap through.
Yeah.
One of the amazing things about the show is the pacing. It's so slow. There's scenes a 4-minute shot of a guy just sweeping a bar. When you were shooting those things, did you think, what are we doing here?
Well, no, you never know what's going to end up in the show and how much of it he's going to use. That was actually Willie the Bee Dolly Grit who was sweeping up. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because he had a pretty cool look, and David, I could tell, was from early on was trying to find a place to stick him in there.
Yeah. So one of David's favorite things is smoke, and I know you're responsible for a lot of that.
Yeah, he's big on
Did
smoke.
you do the smoke where they find the girl's body in the woods and the smoke coming out of Kyle's body? And
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, we did smoke everywhere. He's big on smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually not as much smoke in that one as there.
Well, the tea kettle thing you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
That was a combination of dry ice and smoke, and made this little rig. And
how did you control the smoke?
with a button.
Because it's but it's sort of controlled? It seems to like go in a circle around that circle.
Yeah, well, that's just the environment. That's where art meets science.
That's David's luck.
Yeah.
Is what
Luck?
That happens all the time. We did a shoot out in the desert
Yeah.
for a Japanese singer.
Yoshiki.
Oh, Yoshiki.
Yoshiki,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah, that was it.
Gary was doing smoke in this weird inversion layer, and these two plateaus of smoke started going opposite directions. It's the weirdest thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
So David was just like, roll, 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 roll. And, it's just his luck. It just happens all the time.
And Sun, Moon, Stars. Did you shoot that?
Yeah.
And we had with Daryl Hannah, we're doing the Sun, Moon, Stars perfume commercial. And we had this robo-fogger, this thing that created low fog. It comes out of a tube. So we're sitting waiting around for whatever, for her to get ready or whatever. So we're just playing, we're just shooting the tube up, and we're bumping it, and it's making these smoke rings.
That's right. Yeah.
And then bump it again. We're just fooling around. What do you run about 4 magazines on that?
Yeah,
4,
probably.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question is, David's sets are really happy. What do you attribute that to? Everybody always seems they seem to be having fun. You guys, you want to weigh on that?
I think it's just, it's just a very open atmosphere. If you have an idea or a thought, you bring it up, and he's always happy to hear it. And most of the time he'll go, no. But sometimes he'll use it or use part of it. But there's never sort of an attitude. There's no attitude on set at all.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very calming. No yelling or screaming.
No.
It's really a great environment. It's just unlike a lot of productions. And there's a lot of things that he'll ask for, but it doesn't quite come out the way he thought of it. But he'll make it work. He goes, you know what? That's what I was looking for, but I can make that work. And instead of carrying on about it, no, it's very.
He's very adaptable.
Yeah, totally approachable and adaptable. Yeah. You bet.
I interviewed Cheryl Lee, and she said that that's one of his genius things, is that he works what's there rather than looking for what's not there.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, do you have anything else you want to say about David?
I don't think we have enough time. But I think he probably gets the award for one of the best directors you could ever work for.
Well, for me, it's particularly on Lost Highway. It was, filmmaking's really hard. It's really long hours. It's grueling, and that was probably the first movie I did with David. And at the end of like 12 weeks of shooting, in the desert at night, and no one really wanted it to end because it was such an adventure. Every day was, you knew what you were going to shoot, but you didn't know how. You didn't know what he was going to ask for. And it just became this sort of a challenge and adventure, and it was just great fun.
Yeah, you can't wait to go to work.
Yeah.
Really.
That's great. Yeah. So, okay. Thank you.
All right. Out of here. See you later. That was a pleasure.
Okay, I'm introducing the next two. Now we're going to talk to Dean Hurley, who is a musician and sound engineer. He began running David's recording studio in 2005. With no experience, he was trained as a visual artist, so he got the job and just kind of learned it while he was there. And since then, he's recorded 2 albums with David and had a hand in pretty much every sound thing that David's done. Duwayne Dunham is an editor who earned his stripes working for George Lucas at Skywalker Sound in the late 70s and early 80s. His first editing job with David was Blue Velvet. He then edited... Working? I don't think this one's working. Yeah, he directed 3 episodes of Twin Peaks. So this one's working? And He edited all of Twin Peaks: The Return. Again?
Check RF3.
Hello? Is this working? Okay, now we will talk to Dean Hurley and Duwayne Dunham. Come on out.
Do you have a preference?
All right. So I will start with you, Dean.
Hey, real quick, when you were introducing me, I noticed you said I had no prior experience.
I thought you taught yourself.
Yeah,
on the
but I
job.
think you angered the audio gods. You know, like
Oh,
that's
really?
why your mic shut off.
But
Yeah.
you were trained as a visual artist, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and see when the mic goes bad on the set like that, that expression will fix it in post. We are.
Okay. Your first project with David was Inland Empire, and you were kind of in training then. What did he have you doing?
Well, when I started that job, it wasn't known that it was Inland Empire. It was was evolving from the series of experiments he was doing on his website. So it was, I think it was like my first, hit the ground running, situation where I saw how things worked up there, where it was just very amorphous and sort of some things come together, but you have to really be kind of in tune to what he's thinking, what's going on, because it just became something later,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was in the dark.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You know David's musical sensibility really well. You've made 2 albums with him. What was the most surprising piece of music he brought into Twin Peaks: The Return? Something that you thought, wow, I can't believe he likes this.
Well, one of the things that excited me the most is actually there was a piece of music played in part 1 and reprised again in part 16, I believe, and it's credited to the Money Magnolias.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the big eye-opener for me, because that song came through, and it's, for those of you who don't know, on the record in the show and everything, it's played like an octave down at half speed.
Mm-hmm.
And when that song was sent to me by David's agent,
Mm-hmm.
I felt an obligation to play it for David, but all the instincts in me were saying, this doesn't fit in Twin Peaks,
Mm-hmm.
And David heard like probably about 5 or 10 seconds of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like probably talking over it, like, yeah, I'm sure it's not really what you're looking for, And he was just like, on Pro Tools you can hit Command Spacebar and it immediately slows things down by half and an octave down. So he's like, lower it and slow it. So I did that really quickly, and at that moment I was flipped around like, what? It sounds so good, and it's like
Yeah.
an old trick that he's used a zillion times, that I've seen him use a zillion times, but it again threw me into that mindset of like, don't dismiss things so easily, so quickly, and
Yeah.
that whole like eternal kind of curiosity that he has, like, just he gives things the time of day, he doesn't quickly dismiss, and it's that openness that I think presents things that would have completely evaporated,
Yeah. Another song that's amazing the way he uses it is Moonlight Sonata. He does,
Yeah.
Tell them how he used that.
The same way, really.
Well, this is, you probably can't even recognize it, but over the first scene when Evil Coop gets shot by Ray Monroe and the woodsmen come and are smearing him with blood, that's the Moonlight Sonata, you know?
Yeah, that one actually...
so slow.
That one perplexes me because he actually loves that song.
I know.
At normal speed, so I'm like, why play it at half speed?
Yeah.
But no, it's all about him twisting it
Yeah.
to get it to do what he wants it to do and to support the image.
Yeah.
And it has to be a dance and a marriage between the image and, you know, he'll do whatever it takes,
Yeah.
you know.
You're also in a band, Trouble, that includes Riley Lynch, David's son, and you guys perform at the Roadhouse.
Yeah.
Was that totally nerve-wracking, or was it fun?
It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Felt like this.
Yeah? Sabrina told me that you guys shot all the Roadhouse scenes in a single day.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was like a little mini film festival within the course of, you know, the
But
production.
you just had to get people on. How long did they spend shooting you? A half hour?
Maybe.
Wow.
I mean, it was definitely moving people in and out, you know, a couple takes each. But it was a cool mood on the set because I got the feeling that all the crew there were sort of like really loving that day because it was so entertainment rich. You know?
Yeah, yeah. An unusual, normally when you listen to the show, it's almost like wall-to-wall sound. When you're watching the show, there's always something going on, like a deep hum or something. Except in episode 18, which is almost silent entirely. What was the thinking behind that?
That's a question for David Lynch.
Okay.
You know, like, I mean, he's obviously dictating everything. So I think he's the real grand maestro in terms of, you know, the undulations of loud, quiet, and a lot of times even on that show, like Ron and myself running the supervising sound editor, even we are largely like pulling out sounds because he doesn't want to hear them. So, you know, it's like those moments where you're just like, really nothing, you know? And it has to be somebody in that directorial role who's seeing the forest from the trees. You know?
Yeah. You recently released Anthology Resource Volume 1. What is that?
That's really just, at the end of the show, there were just a number of things that I had contributed and that were used in the show that were licensed in a way that Johnny Jewel's stuff was licensed for the show. So I was just trying to make that stuff available, group it together, and have that be accessible because I knew it wasn't probably going to be on the soundtrack, the proper soundtrack. Yeah.
So, Duwayne, your first project with David was Blue Velvet, which you initially resisted taking that job.
Yes.
Why did you resist, and how did he persuade you?
Well, I'll answer the last of that first by saying it was just a few gollies and aw shucks. And we were like kindred spirits. And, but David called me out of the blue and asked me if I would cut Blue Velvet. I said, maybe you ought to meet me first. And so I flew to L.A. I was up in Marin County at the time. Flew to L.A., met David, and, you know, David's a good old boy. And a lot of aw shucks and good golly. And he gave me the script, and I started reading it on the airplane back to San Francisco, where I was to meet some friends for a movie. And the script disturbed me so much when my friends walked by, I shrunk down in my car seat so they wouldn't see me, because I couldn't talk to anybody after reading that. And then I finally had to call David back, and I said, it's a very interesting script. I love your work. I'd love to do it. But I tell you what, David, it's really not my cup of tea. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, I'm kind of a Disney guy. And, you know, this is just, you know. And he said a few things. And then eventually it just really came down to, I had a few offers at the time, and I sort of went through those offers and said, who can I learn the most from? And I still say that today. And it was David, and so I said, yeah, let's go. And off we went.
Yeah. Let me see. I recently saw Richard Beamer did a film called Behind the Red Curtain that's going to be in the limited edition DVD that comes out. And it's all just footage, behind the scenes footage of the Red Room. And I noticed that the way those scenes are shot, it's these tiny little pieces of incredibly precise choreography. I mean, the scenes have this fluid, dreamy feel, but they're really tiny little pieces. Are those hard to edit?
They're not hard to edit. It's hard to make sense of sometimes because of spatial geography. You know, the way it's shot, it's just a hallway, it's just a red curtain, but nothing is just when you're working with David's stuff. David is a master of somehow finding a way to put a ton of information, a ton of emotion in even the simplest of shot.
Yeah.
So, you know, to me, they're not the most, you know, interesting shots to cut with, but what's in that Red Room is very interesting.
What are the most interesting shots to cut with?
Well, I'm a big fan of reaction shots. I love reaction shots, and especially with David's material. David is able to dig so deep into, he knows specifically what he wants in a painter's background. He composes that frame. So there's a lot of information to read in the frame, but it's always the character. Any one of them, anything that I've ever worked with David, it's always those. You can expect the performance to be great, but you're looking for the reaction shot to be even greater. And oftentimes it's the reaction shot that is more powerful than the action itself. And with David's, well, that scene with Balthazar and Aemon, Red and Richard in that just two guys in a scene, unbelievable reaction shots on Aemon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because David was improvising on Balthazar, and it's like, okay, how do you put that together? I'll tell you how you do it. You put the audience in the other character, and you're witnessing the action, and so that character is you, the audience, and you just focus in film. It's the tunnel in the eyes. You've got to see the eyes. You can see right through the eyes.
Another thing that's really key to the film, and I think big part of its magic, is the pacing. It's incredibly slow. And there's scenes like, there's the scene of Gordon Cole and Christabel and Laura Dern on a stair having a cigarette for 3 minutes, and like one word is exchanged. There's the floor, long takes of Gordon Cole's face. How do you know how far you can push that? How do you know when you've stretched it out as far as you can before the audience starts thinking, oh, maybe my television's broken?
Well, gee, I said that a few times watching this last series. What just happened there? Is this thing on? No.
How do you do that? How do you gauge it?
Well, look, David is supremely interested in the infinite. And nothing can be too long, I think, for David. He finds interest in absolutely everything. And it shows in his material. And so part of it is understanding what David wants, but the other side of it is he and I do have this thing where I'm always trying to cut it a little tighter, a little quicker, and, you know, he lets it go. In fact, you know, we cut 18 hours, and he didn't see anything until he saw, at that time it was only 14 hours. Imagine that. He saw a 14-hour movie, and all he wanted to talk about was transitions. We got to lengthen those transitions. David, we're lucky we've got scenes up there. We'll get to the transitions. But, you know, that's where the mood comes in.
Yeah.
And it's about the mood, and the mood is set by David. It's set by the material.
Yeah, there's so much of that interstitial little scenes that really have nothing to do with anything, but
what it does, at least in this one, most things Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, the assignment there was to cut them in half. So that's good. That's a meal.
Yeah.
This one was different, but I think what it does, because it's difficult. As an editor, your job is you are the audience, and you only present as much information as you think the audience needs to see at that moment to remain interested and engaged. What happens with David's stuff, because I think it's unexpected, those long car drives and stuff, you, the audience, I think, if I'm right, put yourself, you may on the one hand be saying, what in the world is going on here? Well, just driving forever. I can tell you, I've cut many movies of driving David Lynch movie stuff. It's gone. It is over there someplace. But it forces the audience to begin to question and say, oh, what is going on? And it's a way to re-engage. David presses that boundary a little bit.
Definitely.
It's like I heard you mention the guy sweeping the floor. It's like,
It's strangely mesmerizing, actually.
strangely enough.
Yeah. So, Dean, you've made 2 albums with David. How do you guys work together? How do you collaborate musically?
Just like 2 guys jamming and, dicking around. It's basically...
Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So...
Well, who leads? Does one of you lead?
I mean, it's not really a lead-follow thing. It's like he'll kind of wander in his studio and say, want to jam? So in the, like, sensing that he's wanting to do that, I'll kind of set up a bunch of things. Like, one of the things that I've learned is, like, in a jam situation, especially with only 2 people, like, you want to have like a kind of an ecosystem of possibilities. Because if it's just 2 people and there's 2 guitars, the amount of stuff you're going to get out is finite. And then if it's drum and guitars, but imagine if the drummer's also like has a pad they can trigger, or sometimes I would try to play bass and play drums at the same time.
Yeah.
Didn't really work. But you try to set up these things, and you just go for a while, and you don't think about it, and you just sort of get into that place where you're reacting and just having a conversation musically. So, like, I would be in a drum booth looking through glass and kind of seeing him get kind of into it, get excited, him playing his guitar, and yeah, it's just like sometimes you can get to a place that is exciting, and then you step outside and you put yourself in the reactionary, like, audience role, and you're like listening to what you did, and you're like, that's cool right there. Maybe that could be the basis of the riff. You just sort of deconstruct something, and you kind of build a song that way. So and then post that becomes the real kind of where he'll write lyrics and try
So
to
the lyrics never come first.
Sometimes they do, actually. Yeah. Sometimes, like, we started out just jamming instrumentally, and then he wanted to try to kind of jam and sing at the same time, and that yielded a whole bunch of different results. Because again, like, if somebody's playing the guitar and there's lyrical content and there's drums, more can happen.
Yeah.
There's more to the conversation. So yeah, but that's definitely probably the funnest part of my job, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so you put out this album, the music from Twin Peaks: The Return, with ZZ Top, amazing music. How did you guys license all that music? It must have cost a fortune.
Yeah, Sabrina was helping a lot with that. Like,
Sabrina does everything.
Yes, and Mayho, David's music lawyer, very talented woman, tracked down a lot of the rights holders, and it can be insane. That Muddy Magnolias track that I mentioned, that ended up being hard.
Really? Because they're a young band, aren't they?
But put yourself in
but they don't own the copyright on the song.
No. But imagine you wrote a song, and you're like, somebody calls you and you're like, yeah, they want to use it for Twin Peaks. You say, yay. And then you hear the song, half speed, slow down. You're like, that doesn't sound like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that I was trying to pass along to the managers and people involved with that is, like, it's cool, and there's a precedent. Like, that happened in like Chris Isaac's song in Wild at Heart in the backyard at the Iguana. Like, same deal. Slowed down, half speed, whole different thing. Good musicians, I think, people who are open to letting their work be, and find a place that maybe they didn't think about. That's like a real gift of a person there.
Yeah. So, Duwayne, we were going to show clips with these talks, but for some reason it couldn't happen. But I asked David, I said, what clips should we show for Duwayne? And he said, show the opening titles. He said, those are pure Duwayne.
No.
What did you do?
On this one or the other one?
This one, the new one.
It's funny. now that he said that, it's really interesting because a little bit of what you mentioned earlier with the music. One day we put just a small 20-minute reel of stuff together to show Showtime, and David says, no characters, no story. And I said, okay, we got any ideas what we should show? He says, no, you'll figure it out. So we put something together, and then I remember it's probably a Saturday because we were up there alone, and that piece of music that was Bad Cooper driving in to Otis' cabin was such a great growling. It just was Bad Cooper. It said everything you wanted to know about Bad Cooper, and so there it was. And one day David was in with Dean trying to smash those two pieces of music, the main theme, the title theme of Twin Peaks, smashing into that crazy growling stuff. And I could hear it from my room, and all day, all afternoon. I mean, it was kind of fun because it was like, how do you mix those two worlds? They're totally different. So when it came to the titles, I'd done the title sequence in the original, and of course we had the waterfall, we had a new waterfall. And I looked at the footage, and one day I said to my assistant, I'm going to tell you something right now. And you're only about 6 months into shooting. And I said, someday we're going to come over that waterfall and we're going to drop into the Red Room. And he says, but. So David came back, and David had all these things and all these ideas. And so it's not really just me, but it wound up being pretty much just that, at least for the individual episodes. The first, which became the so-called pilot, was a little bit longer, and we put some of the clips in of, David would say, we get Laura's 8.5 by 11. It's okay, let's put it over the sky, and let's
Yeah.
Over the years, David and I have sort of a shorthand, and, he'll just say, make it more red.
I love in the opening how you took that portrait and kind of drowned her,
Oh yeah, well that was just a stroke of luck. And David, of course, is somebody that absolutely believes in the magic that happens in the moment. That's why he is always in the moment. I myself have a hard time, I'm always trying to climb out of the moment, see what else is going on. But no, but we went inside that trophy cabinet, which was footage from the original pilot episode. And to this day, that pilot episode for me is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful piece of film.
Oh, yeah.
We've screened it once at the Directors Guild. That's all David. But that's like seeing liquid gold on the screen. That first one, there was some kind of heavy magic going on. Yeah. But so this one was simply, we went into that trophy case, which we had done before, and it sort of wasn't working. It wasn't the same emotional resonance. And then, like I said, let's go to the waterfall, and there happened to be a shot. It's made up of about 3 shots, kind of all dissolved together. And then we did this 9-second dissolve. So Laura, we're pushing in, which we created as well. But push in, the water starts coming, and then, the idea is she slowly sunk. And then over she went, landed on the beach.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's all feeling, though, and that's David.
Yeah.
It's all feeling.
Okay, I have time for one more question. Dean, what is your favorite piece of music in the new show?
Good God, Kristine.
Come on.
Gosh, I don't. Any other ideas? Anyone?
Well, No Stars is pretty great.
Yeah.
And the Platters song, come on, Mike.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And that was written in the script. There was a couple things that were written in the script
songs?
level. Yeah. So those have like the kind of deepest DNA resonance with the new series. I am a big fan of Julie Cruz, and I think that song, at the end of the series is kind of amazingly poignant. just even the first line of lyrics that come in, Haley's Comet is come and gone. You know, it's like it's the whole like poetic essence of the show. You know, happening again, like Haley's Comet, like 27 years later or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
Okay. It's all cool.
Yeah.
With David. Okay, I guess I'm told we have to go now.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kristine.
Good job.
Thanks for joining us. Please exit the theater. And as a reminder, Bill Pullman cannot join us tomorrow. Lost Highway will be replaced by Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me and a conversation with Cheryl Lee. Don't forget, Moby will be spinning in the lobby at 7:30 when we reopen the theater.